As discussed with the homes, the Romans love murals. By the way, the Greeks probably love them as well, and many of these ideas they're getting from the Greeks. They're copying famous paintings that they had, but we don't have, from the Greek world at the time. Obviously, they haven't survived 2,000 years, and so it gives us an idea not just of Roman painting, but Greek painting as well. We'll get to that. There are 4 styles that we typically see of painting in Roman houses. The first style, Harry styles, the first style is, in fact, this very simple form. This is true fresco, buon fresco, and what they're doing is they're trying to imitate costly marble and stone revetment. In other words, they're trying to make it look like they've covered their walls in marble, limestone, granite, when in fact this is simply plaster that's been marbleized. Sometimes they're simply colored stones. In other cases, they are intricate marbleized or granitized stones. These are phenomenal pieces that would have taken a great deal of skill. They often use stucco relief as well to give that sense of a stone standing a little bit proud of the wall, or a stone that's been cut in some way, although that's all done with plaster. And we see this as a Greek influence, primarily from the late 4th century BCE on. The Greeks are probably doing exactly the same thing. The Romans really look up to the Greeks in a lot of ways. The wall structure is also very apparent in it. The second style is popular most commonly between about 80 and 15 BCE. It goes through a major trend, and this is depicting gardens. So this is a gardenscape. This would be painted on the wall of that back peristyle where you already have a garden. Sometimes these are in rooms, very similar to our spring fresco at Thera, for example. And what we're seeing is possible Greek influence or maybe a Roman invention. The idea is to dissolve the walls, and we see this imaginary 3-dimensional world with a lush gardenscape, in this case, for the wife of Emperor Augustus. And this is done on the garden wall. Here it is in a museum or in preserved otherwise. And what we get is something interesting. We get 2 things that we usually say are coming from the Renaissance. First of all, we have linear perspective, scientific perspective. So these walls are dropping back in space using orthogonals, using these receding diagonal lines. Also, we see atmospheric perspective. Excuse me, I'll back up there. We see atmospheric perspective, where elements, as they fall back in space, become less detailed and lighter in color, lower contrast. This atmospheric perspective is something that won't come up again after the Romans until we really get to Donatello, Masaccio, in the early to mid Renaissance, the 15th century. The third style is really this idea of sort of a postage card or a postcard. So you're looking at a really small landscape image, and the idea is to draw you in. They're often on monochromatic backgrounds, so you're paying attention to what's going on. And it's supposed to give this tiny floating scene. It's not an extension of space, it's more like a tiny framed image. It would draw you in so you get closer to it, examine it, try and see what's going on. These may be reflecting the Greek tradition of using panel paintings and displaying them in their homes. So it may be the same thing. This may be sort of the depiction of an easel showing a painting. It's a painting of a painting, if that's the case. The fourth style is really combining the other 3. So we see a lot of color, we see something very, very eclectic, and we see them with different styles. So in this case, we have third style. So here's our little postcard image. Here we see first style with the stone. We see the second style, the gardenscape, or at least the perspective of it, used as we look back through these pieces. Here we see another situation. Here's that gardenscape. We have linear perspective. We see some atmospheric perspective as well. So it's a mix of scenic and architectural elements, maybe mythological scenes revealing Greek mural painting, but we can't be sure that they're direct copies because we don't know what the Greek paintings necessarily were unless they were written about and we still have the writing. So very similar to later ideas such as the Sistine Chapel, where Michelangelo again uses a trompe-l'oeil technique, so in other words trying to fool the eye, break up the space and create all of that sculpted element that isn't actually there. The Sistine Chapel is simply a shallow arch. There are no columns or pilasters or sculptures on that surface. The Romans are doing the same thing, and the Romans are probably inspiring the later Renaissance because they're familiar with some of these spaces, not very many of them, but some of them during that Renaissance period.